Hi, this is Sergeant Betsy Brantner Smith with the National Police Association, and this is the National Police Association podcast. I have a guest today. His resume is about 6 feet long, and it's pretty extraordinary. We're going to try and touch on as many things uh, as we can. But first and foremost, of course, we're going to talk about his experience in law enforcement, but he is so much more than that. Welcome, the founder and president of InVest USA, Michael Letts. Welcome to the show.
Well, Betsy, it's always a privilege to be with you. Thank you for what you're doing. Our cops more than ever now need the support, and we thank you for it.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you so much. So speaking of that, before we get into anything else, because you're an Army vet, you're a chaplain, you're a pastor, you're so much more. But let's talk about, why'd you become a cop?
Well, I would say it's a funny story. To be honest with you, Betsy, I would say graduated from Liberty University. That's Jerry Falwell, if you recall. Of course, he's deceased now, but I used to call him Doc. I was captain of the weightlifting team. I was a national weightlifting competitor. And as such, I was ex officio his bodyguard. And so we went all over the country. But you remember the time he was close associates with Ronald Reagan. So we were in and out of the White House continuously. And I actually did work with the Secret Service at the same time. And when we left there, I came back to home, which is Columbia, South Carolina. I have a family trust and began to help the family. And also had my degree in ministry. And so I served as an associate pastor helping a small church. Kids were involved with drugs. And so I called sheriff. I said, what are we going to do about it? Because my family had been politically involved for decades. And he said, what are we going to do about it? What are you going to do about it? I said, well, I'm not the cop. You are. He said, we'll fix that real quick. So in South Carolina, we have state constables appointed by special ordinance by the governor. Governor was a good friend of mine, Dick Riley. And Dick said, here's your credentials. Now, go solve the problem. I haven't been able to find an exit strategy ever since, to be honest with you, Betsy. That was over 32 years ago.
That is so fantastic. And when you talk about the Reagan era and what, that's when I was a baby cop and what we were dealing with then, the war on drugs and all of that, that really did shape a lot of us. It shaped a lot of policy. And yet here we are, just as an aside, right, still fighting the war on drugs, just on kind of on a different level.
I think what we've done, Betsy, is we've taken the war on drugs where it needed to go, and that's its origination points, cartels, et cetera. That's what's made a difference.
Absolutely. I'm sitting here 80 miles from the southern border in Arizona. And, I think that's one of the things that I don't think Americans realize, although I think they're starting to, based on what's been happening in the last few weeks. They're starting to really understand the reach and the power that the Mexican drug cartels have. And it's not just Mexico, and it's not just the United States, and they do operate in all 50 states, but they operate in about 60 different countries. And so when we're fighting that war on drugs that we have been fighting for decades and decades, the reach internationally is extraordinary. And unfortunately, here in the United States, we do have a population that has an appetite for those drugs.
Well, there's no question. I grew up in Mexico. My parents were missionaries. Grew up in Guadalajara, Puerto Vallarta, Tilapia. In fact, grew up with the Mexican cartels. We played in the streets together, for goodness sake, Mencho and others. And so I know exactly what they operate, how well versed they are, what they control and don't. And if America really understood, they are a fine-tuned business organization. They run this as one of the most finely run corporations in the world. And they know exactly who to pay, what to do. And of course, we've decided that we're going to take the fight to them, have closed off the borders. We're costing them, Betsy, almost $100 billion a year. And nobody likes to lose $100 billion on their bottom line. And so that's why they're fighting back as hard as they are.
Yeah, that is such a great point. So you get involved in law enforcement, and you're at that time you're an associate pastor. Now you're a head pastor, I guess. Would we call you?
Well, the interesting thing, my father is a minister. Of course, he's got his doctorate, and when he completed his doctorate degree, he was an associate pastor. I was a youth pastor. It's all in the same church, Dad said, what else should I do? I said, well, Dad, you're still young. He was in his 60s. I said, let's just go start a church. If you want to, I'll help you. And we've started 2 or 3 of them since then with schools and the whole 9 yards. And I've always been the executive pastor from that point on.
I love it. So you took that and did you create a chaplaincy program or, because, and the reason I ask is this was one of the programs that I ran in my own police agency was our police chaplain program. And,
Right.
As a Christian, I knew the importance of bringing chaplains to cops because, cops tend to work on Sundays and cops very often, even when we're raised in a church, we become a police officer and we kind of get away from it. We get cynical. Sometimes we even get angry at God because we see so many horrible things that happen
Right.
and we wonder why God is all of this happening. Talk about your chaplaincy.
Well, I will tell you this. I mentioned to you when I first got involved with law enforcement from a standpoint of dealing with the drug problem that we have with our youth group. And then as I began to get further and further involved, I began to realize not only are we attempting to provide justice and make sure we keep crime in check, but the toll it's taking on our law enforcement officers, as you alluded to, you see the worst of the worst 24/7. You don't get a break. Not only do you not get a break, Betsy, it's horrible nowadays. They don't appreciate what we do. I mean, you get the scorn besides having to put up with everything. What people don't understand is, look, cops are human. That means we experience emotions, we experience frustrations, we experience difficulties with our own personal lives. And who do we get to turn to? And so you begin to see that comes out in your performance. It really does. It becomes, evident as to how you're doing your job as a cop. And so really, chaplaincy is a critical component of law enforcement. But you'll notice that's kind of a mixed bag. I'm talking about on a national level. Some agencies have chaplains. Some let you create a chaplaincy program. Some actually discourage it. Shockingly, but some actually do. And so I began to see, look, I will continue to do the law enforcement aspect, but even the bigger need is to make sure we're taking care of our own, which is, of course, one of the reasons why we started InVest, to make sure they had the bulletproof vests and the protection they needed to be able to come home safe to their families. But if you don't take care of your own, Betsy, what do you think you're going to get? And this is what affects our safety and the future of our children and our grandchildren. If we don't take care of this now, what are we going to leave as a legacy for the next generation? We won't have one. That's why I'm trying to make sure America understands that I realize the mainstream media wants you to think that cops are bad, they're orgs, or, they're racist or sexist, et cetera, et cetera. But the truth of the matter is they have an agenda behind it. And what is the agenda? When you take a look at what's going on nationally, Betsy, look at the fraud that we're encountering in this country. Look at what's going on in Minnesota. Remember, that's just one state. That's just the tip of the iceberg. We're talking about billions of dollars. And what happens with these billions of dollars? Well, even the mainstream media is getting paid off. They're getting that money. And this is not my opinion. We have the documentation. We can prove it exactly how much. Nobody wants you to take away their money. That's just human nature. Whether I'm stealing it or not, I want to keep it. I want to keep it going. And so they view law enforcement, as they should, as a threat, because once we begin to investigate and begin to expose what's going on, that's all going to come to an end. So that's why they're so diligent and desperate to join the leftist liberals to achieve the objective of getting them back in power so they can squelch all these investigations, squelch all these stories that you're doing, Betsy, as well, about, what's really going on in America. And they can continue to rake in the dough, steal it from you and I, till they drive this country bankrupt. Once it collapses, then they'll figure out where they're going to go from there.
That is so well said. And do you see this current war on ICE agents as a continuation of the media and the far left war on cops from 2014 and then from 2020 on?
There's no question, Betsy. And here's how you frame what you just said. They are so desperate to get back in power, and they've got to keep law enforcement portrayed as a bad or they're part of the problem, because that way when the investigations start moving forward and the information comes out, they can always say, well, you don't trust those cops anyway. Have you not been listening to all the stories on mainstream media? So they're trying to make this portrayal. What they're doing is to show you how skewed they are and how they've lost total common sense. They now want to block funding. They're saying, I'm blocking it for ICE because we don't like ICE. They're not blocking it for ICE. ICE got funded under the big, beautiful bill. Who are they blocking? They're blocking Border Patrol. They're blocking the Coast Guard. All the key components that bring in the drugs and the human sex trafficking, child sex trafficking, et cetera, they're putting that at risk. They're opening that venue back up again. That just shows you how much they don't care about you and I as Americans. They don't care about the fact of us being safe. They care about one thing. That's keeping their objective. Their objective is that we need to be back in power so we can keep this cash flow going of stealing money from the U.S. Treasury, bettering ourselves, being in a position that we can tell you what to do. You don't have any choice about it. That's what they care about. They don't care about you and I.
You know, when Barack Obama was president, he started something called the 21st century policing. And really what it was the government's attack on the American law enforcement officer. And in that 21st century report, one of the things that he talked about, and I was really struck by this when I read it, where he was talking about transgender people and how American law enforcement officers were mistreating them. And I was pretty stunned to read this because and again, back in the day, you're the same thing. We didn't even use that term transgender. We had people that were cross-dressers. We had people that were transvestites. And then there was gender dysphoria that really law enforcement officers rarely dealt with. So you look at that, and now you fast forward to transgender is really part of our national political argument. It's part of our vernacular. And yet in the last several years, we have had multiple transgender or non-binary people involved in violence, mass shootings, things like that. Talk about some of your thoughts and your research on that.
Well, let's take a look at where we're at as of today, Betsy. Just in the last 12 months, I can't even keep track as to how many active shooter situations we've had, school situations, mall situations. When you go back, statistics show roughly 80% of those that were involved were transgender. You say, wow, I didn't realize the statistic was that high. How did it get to that point? Well, when you talk about the days that you and I are involved here, Betsy, cross-dressers and all, it was an appearance thing, okay? But it wasn't a medical issue. The medicinal field, drug companies decided to get involved, and they make big money off of the drugs that they provide to help transition. Why is that statement so important? What do they provide to help transition? Hormone therapy. Well, I've used this illustration. Fox always gets upset with me when we do on national TV, but it's something everybody can relate to. For the guys that are listening to me right now, we all understand there's a time during the month that you better just go in early and come back late, okay? Or make sure you can duck fast. But I'm not just picking on the ladies. Let's talk about from the guy's standpoint. Remember, I told you I was a national weightlifting champion, so I've been around those that use drugs, steroids. It's called roid rage, okay? Mm-hmm. When you get that kind of hormonal additional or playing with the hormones, you're all over the board, Betsy. Now, take that back to what we're talking about with transgenders. What do you expect when you're giving these people all these hormones? How do you think they're going to react? You don't know whether they're going to be smiling at you 1 minute and pulling out a gun the next. And then when they do follow through with what the medication actually helps them to do, which is to lose their minds, we sit back and say, gee, how did that happen? What's wrong with them? But nobody wants to talk about it publicly, Betsy. And the reason why is because the pharmaceutical companies, it's their golden calf. They're making a ton of money off the drugs. Pharmaceutical companies, if you'll sit down and watch TV anytime, 50% of the ads are all drug ads. Pharmaceutical companies spend the majority on the media. Nobody wants to touch the golden calf that spends the money, so we just ignore the problem. And we sit back and bemoan the fact, I wonder why they're killing people. It's not hard to figure it out. That's if you just follow the logic and follow where the money's at.
Well, and the media very often actively hides from people, that these shooters have, that they are transgender, that they're transitioning, have transitioned. Going back to the Nashville Covenant School shooting,
Correct.
it took years to get that entire manifesto, even though the National Police Association demanded it almost immediately. And, why do you think that is?
Well, it's very simple. It doesn't help their narrative. They don't want you to have that information because then the next logical, remember, they don't have very much logic, but the next logical step is, okay, so what's causing people to react this way? When you begin to read their own thoughts as to why they're doing what they do, you realize that it's a mental concern. What would be affecting their brain? Well, it's pretty easy to figure out when you alter their hormones, this is what you get. And then you begin to say, well, why are we allowing this to occur? Why are we allowing the manipulation of hormonal activity and putting people at risk or death? Because the people that are killed by these active shootings are not coming back. So you're hurting the American society, you're hurting America's people by not addressing this issue. But they don't want to address it because then they'd have to admit that, well, maybe we made a mistake on this drug. Maybe we shouldn't be doing this. We have to give up that drug market. That's billions of dollars of revenue that they're not about to touch.
Do you think too, we kind of talked about it a few minutes ago, but there truly is a war on Christianity as well in this country. Um, and do you see those issues as adjacent?
Oh, there's no question. We are in an epic battle between good versus evil. Never before in the history of society has we been this engaged. There's a number of patterns. You take a look at what we are trying to do to destroy America. Anybody that hates America, whether that's Islamic jihadists, whether that's the drug cartels, whether that's the leftist liberals, they have all figured out now how to unite and try to utilize their forces for one objective. And that objective is this: tell everybody the conservative values upon which this country was built, by the way. We have faith, we have principles, we have values. It's amazing what we've done in our education system. I know I'm taking a real quick rabbit trail, but I'll get right off this thing. But we did something in our education system that we decided we're going to separate God from church. God from education. What we didn't realize as Christians was that their definition was anything dealing with religion is separated. So values are part of religion. So we can't have values in our school system anymore. It's not wrong to steal. It's not wrong to take life. It's not wrong. It's all circumstantial. All depends on the circumstance. That's where we've got the mess that we're in today, but that's a whole nother story. So you've got these people who are determined to bring evil and have evil prevail. And that's what we're fighting. And Betsy, if we don't tell people, they say the truth will set you free. If people don't know what's going on, we get to where we're at today.
So the boots on the ground for all of this conflict in the United States is the American law enforcement officer.
No
And
question.
already in the first about 60 days of 2026, we have had 63 police officers shot, 7 killed. This war on cops truly continues. Ambushes are up. So that brings me to InVest USA. This is, I wore body armor for 29 years. I never walked outside of my locker room without it on. What prompted you to create InVest USA and talk about what that organization does?
Well, I was that one of the things I've been in public office. I served on council for 30 years. And during a question and answer session at a civic group, somebody asked me, what about the vests these guys are wearing? Do all of our cops have them? And I assumed that they did. I had the sheriff with me. He said, no, we don't have any. You'll provide them. So I figured, well, that's easy enough done. I was newly elected. I said, we'll get it at $500,000 in the budget, have this taken care of by the next 30 days. Well, when I was out of town for third reading, I came back and had all those reporters ask me, what do you think about your colleagues taking it out at the last minute? So I made a statement. Most politicians, you're supposed to think before you speak. I didn't do that. I said, well, fine. If that's the way they feel about it, we'll just raise the money ourselves. Betsy, that was 33 years ago. I haven't found an exit strategy yet. Still working on it, but until every cop has properly protected, we're going to continue to stay the course.
So 33 years later, I mean, body armor technology has, as you talked about, has changed greatly. How do um how do law enforcement agencies or individual police officers access body armor if they can't afford it from Invest USA?
Well, it's all they have to do is go to our website. That's InVestUSA.org. It's a charity.org. And they can apply. We give it, well, it used to be first come, first serve. Now we have a policy that if your agency has lost an officer in the line of duty, then you take precedent because we want to make sure that officer and their family are honored. But we're taking every request that comes in. We're trying to make sure we get it paired up. And if we don't have the funds available, then we go into your area and raise the funds. Usually what you're going to find, contrary to what mainstream media is trying to tell you that nobody likes a cop, America loves their first responders. They just don't know how to show it.
That is so right. We have done polling with Rasmussen and found that indeed most people love their law enforcement officers. They're concerned about our safety. That was one of the biggest surprises for me. They're also concerned about our mental health, and they want more cops, not less cops in their neighborhoods. I mean, that's one of the biggest things that the media wants you to believe, that people don't want to see cops. People really want to see their cops, don't they?
They no question they do. This, we established a bulletproof vest partnership. In fact, I was a part of that in 1993 with, or 1995, excuse me, with Senator Thurman and Ben Campbell and the rest in D.C. And Strawman asked me, he said, we just want to get a program together where the feds provide vests to every cop. I said, Senator, with all due respect, that sounds great, but I want this to be a partnership where the people can have the opportunity to feel like they're a part of law enforcement, that they're actually working together and helping provide security and protection. Because I think what it will do to cops across the country when they know that the citizens are behind them is just irreplaceable. What it'll do for their morale. And I think we've been right.
Yeah, absolutely. So, last question. You're also an expert in national security. You served in the military. We're once again, in a time where foreign adversaries want to continue to bring the fight here to the United States. And again, the American law enforcement officer is going to be on the front lines of that. Talk about that for a few minutes.
Well, there's no question what you said is accurate. We know that there are over 1,000 sleeper cells in this country that we've identified. We know, for our intel has shown over the last 6-7 days, that the Iran at the time had called upon these sleeper cells to be activated. We know of a couple of cases here, and Austin, Texas being one in the last 3 days, and Cincinnati another, and DC another, to where there is connection to Islamic jihadist extremism. People ask me, they say, well, how come is that it? Is there a lot more coming? I give them this reminder that, Iran is the biggest sponsor of terrorism in the world. However, we've decimated their leadership. And decimated leadership also decimates how they figure out how to get money from one place to the next. So contrary to what they would tell you, they don't die for their cause because they have nothing else to live for. They die for their cause because they're getting paid to. And so when we put a crimp on the money for now, it's not as, you're not seeing as many sleeper cells activated in the country. That doesn't mean it won't happen in the days ahead. So you're right, it will fall upon our first responders, who will be the first line of defense. That's why it's so desperate that we show them that we support them, and I tell people this: you can't donate, that's fine. Just tell the cop next time you see him, thank you for serving. That's all you have to do. Thank you for your service. If you're able to, even if you could only give $1, go and make sure that they have the necessary equipment to come home. And then the final thing, keep them in your prayers, because folks, this is a different era. It has never been seen in this country before, and we've got some rough times ahead.
Incredibly well said. Michael, where can people find you? Where can they find Invest USA? Where can they follow what you're doing? Where can they help out?
They go to our website. That's InVestUSA.org. It's a charity.org. They can keep a track of everything that's going on. They can make a contribution. We've got books, we got movies that are being produced. We have TV shows that are being done. You can keep track of everything. In fact, I'll put in one little plug for something that's fixing to come out. We got a graphic novel. That's new terminology for an old thing I call a comic book. But the reason why we're doing this, Betsy, is because we need to let our young people know, contrary to what you see on mainstream media, law enforcement and public service is honorable, it's fulfilling, takes a special person to do so, but you just may be the one that has the heart to take care of our future generations. So make sure that you view it in the right light. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you for taking care of America, because that's exactly what you are for our future generations. And God bless you. God bless America. Thank you, Betsy.
Thanks for spending time with us today. And if you'd like more information about the National Police Association, you can visit us at nationalpolice.org.
Every day, the brave men and women of law enforcement put their lives on the line to keep us safe. But they need our help to continue their mission. Activist politicians, progressive prosecutors, the ACLU, and the rest of the anti-police forces receive millions in donations from extremist pro-criminal elements like George Soros and woke corporations. The National Police Association is fighting them in courts around the country, including the United States Supreme Court, defending officers who are being attacked for doing their jobs. Additionally, the National Police Association works year-round to pass tough-on-crime legislation to put and keep criminals behind bars. Consider going to nationalpolice.org and donating to keep us in the fight. Together we can win. That is nationalpolice.org.